Hi everyone, this is Jacqui Cooper with J. Cooper Travels, and today I have a really special guest on. We're going to be talking about writing, we're going to be talking about travels, we're going to be talking about some of our mutual interests and passions. And today I have Leah on, and she is based in Nebraska. And that's a state that I haven't explored yet, so I'm really excited to talk about that. But in the meantime, I want to welcome you on. Thank you so much for being on. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.
Sure. So, we connected on LinkedIn, and I see that you have done a lot in a short time. You have been a contributing editor on different publications. You've been a freelance writer. You've also been an entertainment writer, as well as an intern dealing with different socio-political and research, just such a variety of things. How did you become involved with writing? How did it kind of be your passion? And what are you developing, like a niche? I know I keep going on, but I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you. Yeah. So I've been writing, ever since I could like hold a pencil since I was really small. When I was 9 or 10, I had a notebook and I just went beginning to end and wrote basically an entire fantasy novel that I was reading to all my family and my friends and teachers, and I was super excited about it. And then I got more, as you kind of referenced, and as you can see on my LinkedIn and that sort of thing, I got more into the journalism end of things. And that happened in high school. I joined my high school newspaper and became editor in chief. And I started writing some humor and satire there. What happened is the editor in chief writes an editorial column, and I started writing in just this quirky, kind of like funny, witty way that was a lot of fun to do. And I became a little like mildly famous in my school for writing these funny editorial columns. And then I went to college and I continued my interest in writing there. I was at Vassar College, was editor in chief of, I know we're both Vassar alums, editor in chief of a newspaper there called the Miscellany News, which was a really wonderful and wild experience. It was like you would get in the office at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday and you wouldn't leave until like 4 a.m. on Wednesday and go back in for a few more hours. It was a lot, but it was a lot of fun. So did writing there. I started out as the humor and satire editor there, so continued with that. And yeah, I'm really interested in music. I love music, and I'm interested in social justice as well. And I'm interested in combining those things in my writing. I was a creative writing minor and a women's studies major, so all of that kind of combined together to inform, the things that I'm doing right now.
So I know that we've talked about this a little bit off camera. You have an interest, like you said, in social justice and also in feminism and in pop culture. So what are you doing currently in those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's very much, what I'm focused on doing right now. So one of the things that I'm doing is I write for 1883 magazine, which is actually based out of London. So it's pretty cool. I've been, obviously working with them virtually that way. And for that, I interview writers, I interview musicians, I interview, those sorts of things. And it's a digital and print publication. And that's been a really cool experience, especially when I get to interview people, who are feminist, and, who share those beliefs and that sort of thing, and kind of have a social justice lens there. And I've actually gotten to talk to some really cool people. I did the cover story actually recently. And I spoke with Ghostmane, who is kind of like a hard metal rapper, but his fiance, Poppy, is actually up for some Grammy awards. So they're pretty, been doing some cool things as a couple. And I also recently did an interview with some of the stars of an original Netflix series, which has done really well. It's called Julie and the Phantoms. And, I know people who are fans of it who were like, oh my gosh, just in my life, really excited that I did that. So in addition to that, I started an internship at the Omaha Reader, which is a local alt weekly. Actually, it's an alt monthly. So kind of think of the Omaha equivalent of New York's Village Voice when that was still in existence. So I'm doing that. I'm really excited about the stories I have coming for that. One of them is on Nebraska curriculum and the degree to which it's culturally relevant and also historically accurate. So looking at those things. Another thing is on the top 20 feminist albums by women in 2020. That'll be coming out soon. So very excited for that.
That sounds awesome. Absolutely awesome. We'll have to do a follow-up podcast just to kind of cover all that.
Once I've done, yeah. And I also have a feminist music blog as well that I recently started. Just did my first Q&A interview there. So both interviewing artists who are feminist and then also like taking a deeper dive into songs and explaining why they're feminist and why it's a great song. So yeah.
That is super. I mean, again, these are all areas that resonate with me and my love of, exploring the different things that you talked about in terms of the arts and culture. So what's your dream job? Where do you see yourself going? I know that, you've done so much in such a short time, but where do you see yourself down the road?
Yeah, I would love to keep writing. That's always been a part of my life. And it would be really cool to be a senior writer at like Rolling Stone or a comparable publication. So, there's a lot of publications I love, like Jezebel, Everyday Feminism, Vulture, Vice Media, one of those kinds of things. I've considered, I've toyed with the idea of academia. Like I said, I majored in women's studies, minored in creative writing. It would be really cool to get, an MA in creative writing, maybe even a PhD in it, which that does exist. People think that they absolutely do exist. So that, or maybe a PhD in women's studies, but that would be down the road a little more. But I definitely want it to involve, writing and editing, whatever I do.
So with editing, I mean, you understand the role of being an editor, but for someone who might be getting into it, what is it actually involved being an editor?
Yeah, it's a lot of very detail-oriented work. And there are different kinds of editors, or just different kinds of comments that you can make. You can focus more on, grammar and spelling and those kinds of things that are, just about like stylistically, or you can focus more on content edits, like, is this a good enough lead? Is that engaging? How is this structured? Are there problems with the organization of this piece? So those are the different kinds of things it entails. And then Google Docs is a great way to edit. There's also, track changes in Word. You can do pen and paper, just kind of depends on what your preference is. But yeah, I did a lot of editing, like I mentioned, at both of the high school newspaper and the college newspaper. And now since graduating, I've had some cool editing experiences, including I actually did some editing work for a book called The Barbizon that is slated for publication by Simon & Schuster in March of 2021. And that deals with the famous Barbizon Hotel in New York City, where many famous women like Sylvia Plath and Joan Didion stayed, back in the day. It's no longer open, but it talks about that. And I'm really excited for the world to read it. I had the opportunity, obviously to read it early as I was doing some of the end note editing for that parts of the final editing process. So it's a really great book.
As someone in the travel space, I love learning the history of buildings and hotels and things like that. I mean, just because some places, whether it's New York or even overseas, I know one place that my daughter and I stayed at started off as a prison, then became a hospital, and then became a hotel. So, and that was in Scotland. And so I think it was the place that we stayed in Stirling. So, I mean, history is just, really, and like you said, depending upon who stayed there, that brings a whole nother ambiance to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really cool.
So talking about, just travel and Nebraska and where you currently are living, some of the listeners might have not visited the state. And what would you recommend for someone who's trying to think about doing a road trip? For the sites to visit, or what's the geography like? Give us a little bit of a feel, because again, our country is beautiful and a lot of times we don't take time to explore our own backyard.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the part of the part of Nebraska that I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, which is kind of the biggest city, the biggest metropolitan area there. And specifically, if you're looking to visit Nebraska, I would say that Omaha, the downtown area, is a really cool place to go. There's lots of theater. There's music. There's the Omaha Opera. There's also we have big acts come in. Everybody from Taylor Swift to Bruce Springsteen, has performed here. There's lots of great shopping. You can buy all kinds of things. There's cool like antique sorts of stores. So that's definitely a big pull for people. We actually have a nationally ranked, like what's in one of like the top 5 zoos here, the Omaha Zoo, which is super cool. Would definitely recommend that if you come out. College World Series is also in Omaha. And another thing that's not necessarily something to visit, but something that's interesting about Omaha is we have a world-class biocontainment unit at the Nebraska Medical Center. And we were one of the few hospitals to have the Ebola patients on the national quarantine unit there. And we had the very first COVID patients here. So those were the very first people from the Diamond Princess cruise that came here. So that's some other interesting trivia about Omaha, but yeah.
I love travel trivia. So where do you hope to live in the future? I know that you've lived in New York. I know that you've lived in Nebraska. Where would you like to live? And also, where have you traveled to?
Yeah, I think I probably, I'm very focused on kind of where the jobs are in terms of where I would want to live. And I know that a lot of the writing, editing, publishing jobs are on the East Coast. So I probably will end up heading back there. I also obviously made a lot of connections in New York during my time at Vassar. So will likely head back to, the city, East Coast, that area. But I would honestly be open to, traveling and, exploring and potentially moving anywhere, again, really following the jobs. And yeah, in terms of like travel goals, I've always wanted to like go to all 50 states. And I've been, to a lot of places throughout the US because I have family on both coasts. I'm currently, in Nebraska. I've done some road trips just traveling with my family, but it would be cool to like knock off all 50. And I've actually never been outside of the country. And it would be wonderful to go to France, which sounds like a cliche answer, but I always studied French actually, I had it in my elementary school. So elementary school all the way through college, learned a good amount of French during that time. Also learned a lot about French culture, and I just love to see it for myself. And I didn't end up going abroad because that was the semester that I was first senior editor and then editor-in-chief of the newspaper. So it would be great, to visit there at some point.
For sure. And especially with your connection with London and writing right now, that might be a natural way to kind of navigate over. Talking about that, since you write about music and you've been involved, with some of that area, do you have favorite artists or favorite albums right now, especially maybe that you might want to write about?
I'm doing a ton of listening. I have the top 20 albums by women, feminist albums by women in 2020. That's coming out soon with the reader. So in preparation for that, and as I'm writing that, I've been listening to a ton of albums by women from this year. Obviously, I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan, and like she just released 2 albums back to back, which was pretty amazing, Folklore and Evermore. So definitely those 2. But also in terms of other music that's come out recently that's been really great. Rina Sawayama released an album this year, kind of a breakup pop album. That's a lot of fun if you love pop. Also, Phoebe Bridgers is a wonderful indie artist too. I'm a huge fan. And actually one of her co-writers, his name is Connor Oberst, and he's from Omaha originally. So we have some cool people come out of Omaha, and he's part of the band Bright Eyes, which is also from Omaha. And they just released an album in 2020. They're male band, but I love them too, called Down in the Weeds Where the World Once Was. And there are a lot of like Omaha references on that album, which is like very exciting to Omaha people. And to anybody, it's just a great album. Would highly recommend. See if you can figure out all of the Omaha, Nebraska influences on there. And then in terms of other stuff, some other things that, pops up on the list and that I've really been enjoying is Chloe and Halle's new album, Ungodly Hour, and Megan Thee Stallion released a new album. So lots of stuff. I could list stuff and talk about music all day, but definitely one of the good things I think that's come out of 2020 is a lot of great music. So yeah.
Well, it's definitely given people time to create because if they haven't been on the road, then they're creating. Exactly. So that's really great. So for my podcast listeners and the YouTube side too, there will be information blocks. So if you'd like to reach out and connect, you definitely can with Leah. And so is there any particular projects, things that you're working on in the future that you would like to share with the listeners so that way they can, they'll know more, and how would they reach out to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So definitely my Twitter is a great way to follow me. I post every time I write something or publish something or something happens, it goes on there. So please follow me on Twitter. I'm sure that I'll give you that information so you can give that to them. And I also just post fun things about like music and feminism on there just as it hits my brain. So definitely Twitter is a great place to follow me. I also have my own website, and in terms of things to look out for, I started a feminist music blog recently, and I mentioned this before, but kind of the two categories I have on there are songs that I take a little bit of a deeper dive into that are by women, and also Q&As with artists. And I just finished up my first part of that, my first article in that segment was with a new artist called Frankie Pineapple. She's kind of an up and comer, and she really had a lot of really great candid insights about her life and music and ageism and sexism in the music industry. So that's something definitely to read. So I'd say website, blog, Twitter are three great ways to follow me. So yeah.
Yeah, you know what, I know we're going to have continuing conversations because as you do your own personal travels and explore things, you're always welcome to come back. And especially, you know, if, like you said, a lot of the music and the individuals that you're interviewing and connecting with, they're connected to different locations. And so it's all about travel in different ways. So I really appreciate your being on. Any last minute thoughts before we log off?
I don't think so, not necessarily. Just thank you so much for having me again. Really appreciate this, and you know, hope that I can get some have more people read my writing out of this and make some new connections. So
Yeah, well, you know what, the J. Cooper Travels is all about telling people stories and sharing new individuals as well as you know, all what they're doing. And so I am super excited to follow your writings, and I recommend that everyone, you know, kind of connect and read and enjoy, because that's what this is all about. So thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
thank you, me as well.